From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, I know I speak for both of us when I say that we absolutely love startups. We love small businesses. There's something gritty and tenacious about them. And every once in a while, you come across someone that had a successful startup. But today, we have a person that had 3 successful startups. Right, so there's definitely something in the water that he's drinking. Welcome to the podcast, Jim Verquist. Tell us, Jim, what makes that grittiness, tenaciousness, and that humility in working with a startup that's so attractive to you?
Yeah, startups, they operate so much differently than what established companies typically do. And so, an early stage startup, which is what my experience is they are masters at rapidly exploring and exploiting unknown opportunity spaces, right? And so when you, if you have a successful business and you're growing well, you don't necessarily need to tap into those skills so much. But every core business matures, and at some point you're going to have to go out and create a new growth engine. And I think we can learn a lot by how startups do it, and that's what I want to talk about today.
Wonderful, Jim. But what's interesting about your experience is that you're not limited to startups. Like, you come to us with a very fresh approach because you also worked for big corp and large corporate America. Now, I know there's that analogy where, the big ship, the aircraft carrier, takes a while to turn, but that little laser sailboat spins on a dime. So walk us through some of your early experiences and how you were able to implement your operating procedures and core competencies to achieve a level of success.
Yeah, well, I wanted to go work for big companies, mainly because startups know how to innovate. Like, big companies are the one that need help. And that's why I love working with big companies so much, is that you've got so much talent, but they actually don't tap into that talent the way startups do. And that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to big companies. So I went into Millennium and I did a turnaround. I went into Best Doctors and did a fast strategy transformation. Everybody knows that change is hard. The problem is that's totally nonsense. Like, change is not hard. Make anybody's job easier, better, more fulfilling. Do those types of changes, people are going to love it. Try to impose top-down things that look brilliant from the mountaintop, but look really idiotic from the trenches. You're going to have a hard go at it. And so, with, for example, the Millennium turnaround, that was a situation where they were bought by a private equity company. They brought in all new management, very top-down, command and control type style of management. And very predictably, the entrepreneurial culture that the company used to have was just killed and destroyed. And companies, the employees were fleeing, the customers were leaving. And so when I came in, they were actually kind of desperate. And so they allowed, when I started talking about, let's bring an entrepreneurial approach to change innovation, they were kind of like, okay, let's do it, because we're kind of out of ideas. And literally within 60 days, the entire culture changed, not because I was trying to change the culture, but simply by creating space for people to use their big brains to do what they think is right for the company instead of trying to do everything top down. So I have never turned around a, 800-ton aircraft carrier, but I do know that big companies, any company, 1,000+ employees, can actually change a lot faster if you let the employees lead the way instead of trying to push things through top down.
Now, Jim, you come in to a company like that as the white knight, hotshot MBA. How do you ingratiate yourself with an inculcated culture that's there?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that everyone is going to assume that you're going to start telling people what to do. And when you come in and actually say, let's get your big ideas out there, right? Because my biggest belief in life is that everybody has big ideas. And when you come in with that attitude and really a genuine kind of desire I know that there are things you want to do that frustrate you, right? That you've been blocked and tackled and things like that. I know you see things that other people can't see. Let's actually make that happen. People respond very quickly to that.
So, Jim, can you give us some real life actionable advice that you implemented with Millennium that made them turn around so quickly within 30 to 60 days?
Well, Millennium was a situation where, they had a good business model. They had good customers. They knew how to make money, but they were going in with very aggressive growth targets and doing it in a top-down way. And the employees basically just rebelled. And so that was a fairly, I would say, simple situation, because you didn't have to go out and try to find a new growth engine. You actually had something that worked, but instead of doing it top-down, you just needed to create space for people to do that. Really working more with the frontline managers in that situation. So it was just about saying, look, we know there's growth opportunities and cost cutting opportunities here. Instead of letting us guess what they are and kind of mandate them from top down, you guys figured out. And we actually, because it was strategy and because of how that worked, you had to wrap some incentives around it. And we had to carefully kind of design the incentives so that if you're always going to get incentives wrong, like you're always going to get targets wrong. And so you don't want to punish people where you gave them unrealistic targets. You don't want to discourage people from going further when the opportunities are there. So that was about strategy. But now really my interest is how do you go in and actually get companies to be innovative in ways that they currently aren't? And that's where I think the lessons from the startups really come into play.
Jim, let's stay there 1 second. Let's try to figure out the balancing act between having a responsive and fruitful middle management versus let's just get rid of all of middle management because there's just a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of fat on this bone.
Yeah, no, there's some, people like to make provocative statements. One of the famous ones is Gary Hamel's article in the Harvard Business Review said, first let's fire all the managers. It definitely gets people excited or scared, depending on what side of the fence you sit on. The problem with that, and this is something that when I first started trying to figure out how do you go into big companies and really do this, I was very interested in these what I call freedom-based management models, literally where you don't need managers. And the problem with that is, first, that's not how our world works. And bureaucracy is not going away. They've been trying to do, W.O. Gore's been doing this for 70 years. And it's not like these models are taking over the world. It turns out that bureaucracy management actually do a lot of really good work. And so when you have an established company, the focus is reliable, efficient execution of that proven business model. There's no better way to do that than with bureaucracy. And so if everybody is innovating and changing the way they do things all the time, you probably don't want to go into McDonald's and get a hamburger very often, because it's going to be different every time. Like, people expect the same experience every time. So how do you kind of do both? That's what I'm focused on. Is we need reliable, efficient execution of the proven business model. Like, that's what makes our businesses make money, right? But then we also need the ability to be nimble and adaptable and to seek out, explore and exploit unknown opportunity spaces. And that's what, kind of the bottom up innovators, that's what the employees are best suited to do. They're closest to the problems and the opportunities. And so that's how startups do it. And that's how big companies can do it as well.
So Jim, tell me about corporate rebels. What are they? And tell me about this BlackBerry story.
Yeah. So corporate rebels is the term that I apply to when you go into big companies and you look at where the big breakthroughs actually came from, not the sexy innovation projects that everybody wants to talk about that actually end up not doing things. But if you go into big companies, there are many, many examples of billion-dollar breakthroughs, right? Where do they come from? Well, they almost never come from an innovation team or a research project or some visionary executive. They come from corporate rebels. The iPhone, Sony PlayStation, the Xerox laser printer. And so one of my favorite examples is BlackBerry, right? Like Gary Claassen was an engineer working at BlackBerry, and he had an idea that he thought could be really big for the company. So he knew his manager was never going to approve this kind of project because it was one of those it's just too far outside of what they do and how they think. And so the idea was, look, I'm going to just work on this quietly, get it far enough along that then other people can start to understand it, and then I'll sell it, right? Like, I'm not going to try to sell an idea. I'm going to sell a project that already has traction and momentum, just like the way that entrepreneurs sell startup ideas to VCs, right? And so he would do all of his regular job, and then whenever he had some slack time in his job, he would work on this other project. And pretty soon his manager sees that he's doing something else and says, stop screwing around and get back to work. And Gary Claassen's like, no problem, and he keeps doing it, tries to be a little bit quieter, more stealthy. Manager finds out a little bit later that he's still working on it. He gives him a bad performance review, threatens to fire him. But by this time, Gary Claassen is like, you know what? I think this is going to work. And he's got 2 other people that have joined the project. And his attitude is essentially, look, if you want to fire me, go ahead. But until then, I'm going to keep on doing this. And the thing with corporate rebels is they're always some of the best employees you have. They're not the slackers and shoddy workers. Like, these people do all their job. They do it better than anybody else. Because if you're working on a unofficial, unauthorized skunkworks project, you don't create risk. You don't do, not do your job. But alongside that, they work on these innovative projects, and that became BlackBerry Messenger. So, that's how the big breakthroughs in companies work. And I think small businesses can be just as nimble by actually unlocking that same type of unofficial exploration within their companies.
Jim, can you give us some advice on how to actually create that? Like, I'll give you some examples on how IBM was super innovative.
Yes.
And then they weren't.
Yes.
GE was super innovative.
Yes.
And then they weren't. Kodak, super innovative. And then they weren't. So how do you not only start that culture, but inculcate it, breed it? How do you ferment that? Yeah,
that's actually what I've spent a long time really trying to figure out, because the corporate rebels are very unusual. There's a lot of people that do autonomy within their job, right? You're in charge of filing, and I figure out a better way to do filing, and no one really notices because nothing else changes. And so I do that. That's autonomy. The corporate rebels actually tackle problems that they're not supposed to work on, that they've got no business working on, that sound crazy to everybody until it works. And so not many employees are going to risk their careers, risk their jobs the way that a Gary Claassen or any of these other innovators who have created the big breakthroughs. And what you actually need to do is you have to authorize this officially. You basically have to do what they did at 3M back in the 1920s, as a matter of fact, where they said, look, we know there's big ideas in this company and we can't see them all, and we don't have the bandwidth and the resources to support every single idea that employees have or that employees want to work on. But if you think that you've got an idea that could be big, go start working on it. And then if it turns into something interesting, then we can talk. And so you've got to authorize it. But this is not, I want to make it clear that this is not Google's 20% time. Google's 20% time was a complete failure. They never created even one single $100 million business out of that entire program, which they ran for nearly 2 decades. Why? Well, the big breakthroughs, the big things are the ones that everybody hates. And so the problem with Google's 20% time and these other schemes is that, you've got to get managers to basically not kill your project. And if even with Google's 20% time, if they see you working on something crazy like BlackBerry Messenger, I mean, come on, or a laser printer, like why would you ever put a laser inside an office machine? That just makes no sense at all. Then they're going to kill it. And so it turns out that it's a great way to do sustaining innovations. It's a terrible way to create growth engines and the breakthroughs that drive growth. And so how do you do it is you need to authorize it, but you've got to have a catalyst somebody outside of management who was actually there to say, look, we are offering direct support, dedicated support to employees that want to do this. I'm going to protect you. You're not going to get in trouble. If anything, if anything, I'll get fired before you do, because they need that protection. And then you've got to tell managers to take a hands-off approach. It's like, as long as people are doing their job and not creating risk, keep managing the same way that you've always managed them. But you can't kill projects, and you can't interfere with them. You can't try to load up more work or give them bad performance reviews or threaten to fire them, which is what we do. So
Sure,
if you do that,
I'm sure that there's a role where you're showing your employees love, but then there's also the other side to that coin, where you've got 20, 30 guys running amok with these crazy pie in the sky ideas. Like, how do you balance that out?
Well, you don't try to regulate it, and that's what startups do. It turns out that the reason this works is because they are self-regulating. These employees, they're not trying to get fired. Like, that is never the goal. And they are actually, what's even more important is they're trying to get their idea and their project far enough along that it starts to make sense to other people. And so in the early days, it's really, people just don't understand ideas, and you don't understand it either. The bigger the idea, you don't know how to explain it. You don't know exactly what you're doing. 80% of what you're going to try to do is going to fail anyway. And so it sounds kind of crazy and risky and all this kind of stuff. But these employees, these corporate rebels, they work on projects. The goal is, if I get this far enough along, then somebody else is going to come along and see what I see, and then it will become officially accepted. And that's why, this isn't about, trying to launch McDonald's franchises inside of IBM or something. People are not going to do that. That a McDonald's franchise is never going to become an official project inside of IBM. But some innovative project that nobody is paying attention to today, but if I get it far enough along, that might. And so that's why you don't have to do it. You don't have to try to, people say all these crazy ideas. Yes, they sound crazy until they become great breakthroughs. And then in hindsight, they say, of course that worked, right? That's the challenge. You try to regulate it. You try to, kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. You end up killing the big ideas and only keeping the ones that are ho-hum.
Jim, should government play a role in innovation?
Well, I think government should play a role in funding big research labs, like the kinds that we used to have. Like you mentioned, GE. GE had a wonderful research lab back in the 1900s, and so we need more of those kind of, and the good research labs. If you read some of the history of the good ones, one of the things they learned, just the way that Silicon Valley learned itself, is that you can't kind of tightly control what people work on. You've actually got to let them have intellectual freedom. So I do think that government has done a good job historically of funding this kind of undirected research, where individuals work on things that they think could be big and become a big idea in the world. But now more and more, everything is tied to finance, and you have to show quick results and things like that. That's where our whole world has moved to. And so we get a lot of just kind of regular, kind of improvements, and we're missing the big breakthroughs. And so I think it'd be great if government did more of that, but we can also do that inside big companies, small businesses.
So government plays a role, right? You've got R&D tax credits, and there's all sorts of opportunity zones. And you see, with this CHIP Act, there's billions of dollars being sprinkled all over the country. So that's wonderful. What about the flip side, where in just a few years, you've got private industry with all these ambitious plans to space and the moon and Mars, whereas NASA was stagnant for 25 years? How do you balance that with government intervention?
Yeah, it's this isn't exactly my wheelhouse, but the general idea is that the more you try to control what people work on, the more you are going to not do much with that R&D dollar. The more you actually let people explore their own ideas that they hope will be big in the world, no matter how crazy they sound. Because again, it's the crazy ideas that you are most tempted to kill, and these are the ones that are most important not to kill. That's the irony of innovation. Most of the breakthroughs come from people in places that the experts least expect. And I think Wall Street has kind of taken over the world where everything has to show an ROI, within a certain time frame. This whole idea that you've got to, kill fast, which is really, so many people in the innovation space talk about, you've got to find those projects that aren't performing, kill them. 3 months. In 3 months, you should know if it's going to be a good idea. No, that is not what the history of innovation teaches at all. In fact, it says exactly the opposite. So I think government should like businesses, they should stop trying to decide where the future is and actually let individuals figure it out.
Jim, before the prestigious degrees and the fancy jobs and the successful startups, Jim was a scrappy kid in the U.S. Marine Corps. How did you segue that into these 3 Silicon Valley startup experiences?
Well, I think the Marine Corps did 2 great things for me. First, it let me live in Japan for 3.5 years and just understand, like, people are the same no matter where you live. Like, governments are different, but people are the same. And I think living overseas changes you in ways that you can't even understand. It's just, so that was an amazing experience. The second thing that the Marine Corps did for me was it taught me what I do not want to do with my life. Like, I do not want to have a job where people tell you what to do and all you can say is, yes, sir, right away, sir. That's not my personality. Startups were a better fit for that.
Do you think that was the impetus? Like, you were in that very rigid model for so many years. Maybe it was just like a natural flourishing of your inner skills to end up in startups.
Yeah, I think it was a natural. I mean, that's the person I am. And the Marine Corps, I didn't, when you're 17, 18, you sign up for the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. You have no idea what you're getting into. Like, you're just, I think I'm a tough guy, and this is going to be quite a challenge. It's going to be a lot of fun. It was from that perspective, but it wasn't. It's not. I didn't think about the command and control stuff. I didn't think about all the nonsense you have to go through. So yeah, startups was much more my environment, and I just think that not everybody can work at a startup. And but we've got all this talent that we need to take better use of. I mean, it's like we've got these big problems in our companies. Our companies are crashing against a wall. We've got these big problems in our country. And normally, whenever, as a person, whenever you face a big challenge, like you want to just kind of roll up your sleeve and do something, right? Like, that's what we really want to do. And in our world, we get to roll up our sleeves and vote every 2 to 4 years, right? Like, that's what we get to do, right? In a big company, we get to roll up our sleeves and hope that the CEO is actually this huge change initiative or innovation initiative that they're launching. We hope that it's going to work because it doesn't seem like it's going to, right? I think we should do more.
So Jim, when you work with startups or you work with larger companies now to innovate their startup programs, right? How do we translate that to a small business? Let's say I have a construction company. The construction company was hockey stick growth. Now it's stalled out, right?
Yeah.
For the last couple of years, we're treading water. And I'm saying to myself, if I can't do anything here, I think I'm just going to shut it down.
Yeah.
Where do we start? Walk us through, walk the audience through where they would start if they're going through this problem right now.
Yeah, that's what I think is exciting, is that what startups do is they don't silo innovation. They don't say, okay, here's the 3 people that are going to be innovators, and everybody else, you nose down, nose to the grindstone. You do what you're doing. And so the corporate rebel model that I bring into companies is focused on turning regular employees into innovators. and that's really where it works just as well in a small company as it does in a big company. And I think what the key is that people don't understand, they're not comfortable with this concept of white space. It's like, look, my employees don't have time for that, or they're worried about the chaos of, oh my God, if I let my employees experiment, I have to approve it. No, this is not how startups work. This is not how innovation works. And that is not what you need to do. And so I think one of the really interesting things is that you've got to understand that employees have white space. If you have employees with schedules and deadlines, there's white space in that work. And it turns out it's about 20% of time at work is actually white space, where if you really wanted to free that time up, you could. And so that's what the corporate rebel model does, is it actually gives employees a little bit of space that is not dedicated time. They are still doing just as much work as they ever were. Now they're a little bit more energetic because they actually get to use their big brains for other ideas that they're excited about for the company. But you can do that right within the work environment, and you pretty much won't even notice it. It's very quiet. It's kind of, these things bubble up, but yes, it works just as well in a small company. And in fact, it will work better in a lot of ways because they just have less bureaucracy. There's more trust. And so you don't have quite the hurdle of getting employees to kind of opt into that. And I can explain how white space works a little bit better, because I think it's one of the things that is the most misunderstood concepts that people are just nervous about, and they needn't be.
So I own a company, 15 years. We stalled with growth. I call you up. We have a conversation. This is all great, right? My employees are not engineers. Mm-hmm. My employees are not, they're salespeople, they're techs, they're technicians.
Yep.
I never gave them this freedom before.
Right.
What do I do? Okay.
Well, first, if you're a Theory X manager, there's like Theory X and Theory Y managers. So first you have to kind of do a little self-evaluation and say, if you're a Theory X manager who your whole attitude is that employees are lazy and stupid and they've got to be poked and prodded to do things, then, just keep doing what you're doing, because this isn't going to work. If you're a Theory Y manager who thinks, we've got more talent and ideas and opportunities out there than I can see. And if I could get these employees to actually take initiative and do something with their energy and drive, and they're at the front of work. Well, there's no better place to see problems and opportunities than at where the work is happening, instead of from the top of the pyramid, from the top of the company. And so if you believe in that, then you can say, yes, okay, not everybody is going to do this. Not everybody is going to be an innovator, although we all have that potential. Now, the second question you have to ask is, what type of manager are you? Are my employees human beings? Well, if they are, then they are natural innovators. Like, by birth, we're all innovative in that way. Show me anybody who doesn't like to tackle challenging, interesting problems and make a difference in the world. Every single person does want to do that. Now, we don't always find the right problem or opportunity, and we don't always have the right kind of situation to be able to do that. But human beings want to do this. And in fact, when you were in sixth grade, or when you were in kindergarten, like we all did this in kindergarten. When you were in kindergarten, you wanted to go out and do something. You just went out and started doing it. And every step you took, you fell down 80% of the time. You didn't care. You got right back up and kept going. By the time we're in sixth grade, like, nobody does that anymore, right? They get in line, they ask permission, and they may get frustrated when they're told no, but they kind of do that. And that's the thing that we've got to change.
Desks are in rows. We have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and we're taught penmanship. There's all this rigidity brought into our lives.
Yeah. And that's what startups do so well, is they do both, right? They've got their initiatives. They've got their official innovation programs and things like that. That's channel one. That's one channel of innovation. But then they've got this separate channel that is completely bottom up and organic. And that's what any company can do. So yes, if you employ human beings, you're a type Y manager. They don't need to be engineers and scientists. They just have to have some type of drive and curiosity in the world. And like I said, not everyone's going to do this, but if you get 10 to 20% of your employees, if you got a 100 person construction company, and you get 10% of those people trying out ideas and taking the things that they see on a day-to-day basis and actually doing something with it, experimenting with it, it will change everything very quickly.
Jim, a couple of months ago, Matt and I, we tweaked our flow in our company, a Shield Advisory Group, and we assumed, out of ignorance, we have to hire someone to do this.
Right.
So after umpteenth resumes, I think 27 interviews, I told Matt, I can't find anybody. Can't find them. So we're having a conversation one day with the team, and a young lady says, hey, Matt, Lou, I can do this.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, I can do this. Done. She's running rings around us.
Yeah.
She's amazing. So like the takeaway there was, before we look externally, let's be a little bit more introspective in the talents that the team has already.
Yes.
Because it was just it was like a visceral reaction. Oh, we have to hire someone, as opposed to what can we do with the team we already have.
Yeah, and that's my whole goal is, get there faster with the team you have. And so, one of the things I like to say is that you can learn more about innovation from watching Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz than you can by reading 90% of the books on innovation out there, because Dorothy is not the person. When the world was going to look for a hero to save the day, nobody was going to pick Dorothy to do that, right? But once she got on this mission, first she wanted to save her dog, and then she was tricked into thinking her aunt was in trouble, and so she kind of went on this journey. It was terrifying, but it's like, it's too important to not do it. And so she got going, and pretty soon, like, she's kind of looking like a person who knows what she's doing. She's going someplace. People start, kind of, hey, can I come along and go on this adventure with you, and I'll help you out, whatever. This is how actually startups work. This is how entrepreneurs kind of do things. This is how innovation works. You don't start with the big team of the best and the brightest, and they go out and change the world. No, they spend a lot of money and then go home 2 years later, right? It's the people that you don't expect anything from. And so I love that movie, The Imitation Game, right? It's kind of the same type of thing. Anybody can do this. And one of the best engineers I ever hired was a guy who was like, he wasn't even an engineer. Like, he wasn't trained. He didn't have the experience. He was like, I just got tired of, when my wife came home from work and I said, hey, did you take your shoes off before you walked in? So he said, that was when I knew I needed to go get back to work. And so I think, when we actually get the opportunity to stretch ourselves and do something that really matters to us, it changes everything, and people can do incredible things. We're taking advantage of a tiny percentage of people's talent at work, and I'd like to change that.
Yeah, scrappiness.
Yes, and we all got it. I mean, we do. I mean, show me a parent, and I'll show you an innovator. It's like, parents get put into all kinds of situations that you have no training for, you are not prepared for, but we do it, right? We get through it and give people a challenging problem, and it's amazing what they can do.
Jim, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the socials?
Easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. My name is very easy to, I think I'm the only Jim Verquist on the planet. So, and then I've got a website, Engine 2 Innovation. It's engine2.us, which I'm sure will be in the show notes, but easy to find.
Jim, thanks so much. Everybody, that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of The Liquid Lunch Project.